Hello students, this is the lecture for Chapter 1, or JMS 200. Corresponds to Chapter 1 in the Mindich textbook. And according to best practices, they do teach us how to be instructors. Kind folks at ITS give us a lot of information on how to be good teachers. One of the things they tell us is that when you're doing a video lecture, do not include anything that will date the content so that students will know in future semesters when you are reusing old material. So don't talk about dates, anything like that. Well, I'm not going to tell you when I'm recording this, but it is summer. Look, see, campus is empty. I love campus in the summer. I love it when it's empty. There's lacrosse going on over there. Anyway, I'm going to get situated in my campus office, get settled, print out some lecture notes. Then I'm going to go camp out by the library and actually record at least one, maybe two, inshallah 3 video lectures today. Wish me luck. All right, get ready for lecture number 1. Okay, as promised, here is the lecture for Chapter 1 from the Mindich textbook. Here we go. Okay, the first thing I want to stress is that media is actually a plural word. The singular would be medium, as in one medium. And we use the term media to describe means of communicating to individuals and groups. And I really want to stress that there are many, many different media outlets, and there is no such thing as the media, just like there is no such thing as the military. The media is comprised of many different channels, many different institutions made up of many different people. And I put here on the screen just some examples. A partial listing of different things that might qualify as the media. We've got internet, television, including analog broadcasting, cable, streaming, radio, including satellite, podcasting, newspapers. And by newspapers, I mean the print version, the online version, the version that's optimized for your phone. We're talking about magazines, again, online and print. We've got comic books. I'm a huge comic book collector geek. I love Daredevil and Gold Key Star Trek. Video games, TikToks, all forms of social media, plus all the industries and people that produce content for these different channels. So when people talk about the media, or the media wants you to think this, or there is a conspiracy to control the media, that really makes no sense. Because there's just so many different things that comprise the media. And I would encourage y'all not to talk about the media as a singular entity. It is actually a whole bunch of different media industries. And including, I don't know why I threw this in there, maybe just for laugh. There's even television at gas stations now. Yeah, I just put this in there as an example of all the different forms of media that exist in the modern world. And I do not know this gentleman. I'm sure he's an actor in a stock photo. I do not know this gentleman, and I do not like to pass judgment. However, I don't think that I would be friends with someone who got so overly excited about gas station television. Now we're going to talk about media and public opinion for a moment here. There's interpersonal communication, and the class is not about interpersonal communication. The class is about mass media, and by that we are referring to forms of media that reach large audiences, newspapers, movies, radio, large disparate audiences, where one person or a small group of people are using the means of technology to communicate to a large group. That's what we talk about when we talk about mass media. And media really does shape our worldview, especially when it comes to events that we don't experience for ourselves. We have no way of knowing what's going on, say, in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Peru, unless we visited there or have family there. So we rely upon the messages that we get from the media. And when the messages that we get through conventional forms of media, when the messages do not align with reality, there could be a problem. Which brings me to a fundamental question. Okay, this is not actually addressed in the textbook, not directly by Mindich, but kind of in subtle ways it is. The fundamental question, as far as I'm concerned, as far as your Professor Arsenault is concerned, the fundamental question of media is, does media reflect reality? Well, of course it reflects reality, right? We are a violent, sexist, sometimes racist culture, and it's no surprise that the media artifacts that we create reflect that unequal power dynamics. It's no surprise that we create forms of media that reflect the state of the world in which we live. Media do reflect reality. However, the media can also create reality. If you put certain messages in people's heads, that women act a certain way and men act a certain way and people from one country act a certain way, when you put messages in people's heads like that, you can actually alter behavior. So from that, the media can actually create reality, and now you have a situation where the media is both reflecting reality and also creating reality. And I think one of the jobs in this class is that we're really going to interrogate this fundamental question and look at, in what ways does the media reflect reality, and in what ways does the media create reality. I think for the most part, media is a reflection of reality. If I had to favor one side of this meme, I would favor the Spider-Man on the left. I'm just saying. But I do think that the Spider-Man on the right certainly does exist as well. And the textbook talks about Katrina, Hurricane Katrina, which seems like recent memory to me. I was already an adult. I was in graduate school getting my PhD when Hurricane Katrina happened. And it was catastrophic, as the graphic headline on the screen says. It really was quite devastating. This massive hurricane that hit New Orleans, and the flooding that came in afterwards, and the levees that were supposed to keep the water out that did not keep the water out. And the city is still recovering. The city still bears traces of this terrible, terrible disaster. And it affected different people differently. The people in the poorer parts of New Orleans, the poorer neighborhoods, got hit worse. Because these neighborhoods were built on low-lying ground. And it kind of makes sense if you think about history. The first parts of New Orleans that were developed were well above water, well above sea level. But once that area was occupied, sort of newer residents, including a lot of people of color and people who are poor, when they moved to New Orleans, they're getting the sort of the second tier neighborhoods, which were exactly the ones susceptible to environmental disaster. The reason I bring up Katrina, well, A, it's in the textbook, but also this really, really classic example of what happens when media puts out images that don't correlate to reality and how it can affect people's viewpoints. This is a very famous example. It's become a classic example. Uh, the hurricane was in August 2005, and here you have an image on the left talking about two residents who certainly appear to be white people. Okay, I think we can say that they appear to be white people. They're wading through water after finding bread and soda. Look at that word. They are finding bread and soda from a local grocery store. However, now you have what appears to be a person of color, a young man walking through chest deep floodwater after looting a grocery store. So the white people are finding food, the black people are looting. This is a very clear example of bias in news coverage, and repeated examples of bias can affect and sadly alter your frame of reference for dealing with human beings in the future. The textbook also talks about lynching. I try and keep lectures light and funny and entertaining, but lynching is a pretty dark, actually a very dark, grotesque subject. But it is in the textbook, and it's certainly worth noting about. For many, many years, decades even, people of color, especially black men, were lynched, not just in the South, but mainly in the South, for presumed offenses against white people or presumed offenses against white women. The textbook talks about lynching, and specifically Ida B. Wells, who was this famous female journalist who took it upon herself. She said, "Hey, I want to investigate the situation that's going on. Why does the situation keep happening?" And Mindich talks about Ida Wells in the textbook. And what she found was that rape was not the stated cause in most cases, although that in conventional wisdom, that has sort of become the recurring belief that you wanted to have a black man killed, you would just say, "Hey, I was raped." Or a white woman could say, "Hey, he smiled at me, he waved at me, he whistled at me." And then a group of white men would go hunt down this poor, uh, usually perfectly innocent black man and commit this horrible, grotesque act of violence. When the allegation of rape was brought forth, it was sometimes done after the fact, kind of made up. If there was a sexual relationship between two parties, it was generally between two consenting adults. But at a time of really violent and virulent racism, even a consensual relationship between people from different races was not acceptable. So, a woman might enter a relationship and then later claim, oh no, I should not have been with that man. Let me say it was rape. But what Ida B. Wells found was that the root cause of lynching was usually economic competition, people concerned about jobs, people concerned about losing control of their job or losing the share of the pie that they controlled, unwilling to share it with other people. And so the way to suppress people of color was to sort of invent stories, make up accusations that would justify. There's no justification for this, but you can imagine it might justify in your own mind why you would do such a horrible thing. So you should definitely take a look at the part of the textbook that deals with Ida Wells, and it deals with the sort of discrepancy between what we see in the media and what actually happens. Now I want to talk a little about trust, and this is a very concerning subject. I do think this is a concerning subject, the fact that so many people don't trust the information that we are receiving from different media outlets. According to this study from 2022, US adults under the age of 30 trust information from social media almost as much as national news outlets. And here are a bunch of numbers, and I'm going to break down these numbers one by one. Okay, now I'm going to break down that big graphic, that big crowded graphic that you saw. I'm going to break that down piece by piece. Here, we're looking just at individuals aged 18 to 29, which I repeat is the bulk of current students currently enrolled in JMS 200. And and I cut off part of the number here. That's supposed to be a number 56. Maaf karo, lo siento, mera PowerPoint skills bahut kharab hai. What that means in my pidgin Spanish Hindi is that I'm sorry, my PowerPoint skills kind of suck. Okay. Yeah, I should not have chopped off the 56. Anyway, okay, let's get serious here. Among individuals aged 18 to 29 from the year 2016 to the year 2022, faith in local news organizations and national news organizations has gone down, but the trust and the belief in social media has actually gone up. When you look at people aged 30 to 49, we see something similar. Faith in local and national goes down. When you look at people aged 50 to 64, which is me, that's your professor right there, eligible for AARP, but I'm still young at heart. Now, look, we got the faith in national going down, local going down, and even the trust in social media has gone down. I guess we are a very skeptical lot of people, and similar trends among those 65 and older, although trust in social media has gone up to 20%, but that's still pretty low. And when you put all the numbers together as an aggregate, you end up with this, that people have less and less faith in all forms of media, whether it's local, national news, or social media. And I just think this is incredibly unfortunate. I do. I really think this is unfortunate. How can we, as a literate society, we're supposedly a democracy, that's what they say in the United States, how can we collectively come together with solutions to some pretty complex problems if we cannot even agree on basic facts of what's happening, if we can't even agree on the reality in which we live? And here's another way of looking at that same thing. Gallup is a very reputable organization that has been tracking public opinion for decades. And they've been tracking this particular metric, America's trust in mass media, from 1972 to the year 2022, and it's gone down. The black line here is what percentage of Americans have a great deal or a fair amount of trust in the media. And it's gone down to 34%. That's well below half. And now here's my spiel, okay? This is what I think. This is not really in the textbook, but this is what I think. That when people say they don't believe the news, they are confusing opinion and news. This is my honest belief that when people say, oh, I do not believe the news, they're just confusing opinion and news. If the news says there's a fire in East County, you need to evacuate your home, there's a hurricane coming, something like that, you would believe. But then when it comes to other things, people say, I don't know if I believe that, because what they're really doing is listening to someone's opinion. And those hour-long programs on cable news, I mean, cable news is filled with these hour-long programs. These people aren't really giving the news. I repeat, even if the name of the network has news in it, they are rarely giving the news. They will give the news for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then they'll spend the rest of the hour screaming at one another, giving purely opinion. That is opinion. That is not news. So I think people are confusing the two. And then we have the situation, which is recent, at least recent as of this video lecture, where Fox News, when I say Fox, it can be confusing. There is a Fox television channel, a Fox broadcast television channel, and then there is a Fox cable news channel. Okay, now I'm talking about the Fox cable news channel. Lost $787 million settlement for libel. We're going to talk about libel in the video lecture about media law. But for now, just know that if you say something that is factually untrue, that can be proven to be untrue. And specifically, if you knew that it was untrue and yet you went on television and said it anyway, you can be legally responsible for some financial penalties. Dominion is the company that makes voting machines, and people on Fox repeatedly said that Dominion was rigged, the voting machines were not accurate, that Trump actually won, and that the evil Democrats worked with Dominion to make Biden win. This contributed to the events of January 6th, whatever you want to call that event of January 6th. Is factually untrue. The judge said it was absolutely untrue, and it wasn't even a matter of dispute if it was untrue. The only matter of dispute in the case was, did the producers and reporters for Fox and the announcers on Fox, did they know it was not true when they said all those things? And it was concluded that yes, they knew it was untrue, and yet they said that information anyway. Here's a little snippet from the news story. The judge said it knew the allegations against Dominion were outlandish and crazy, yet it used the power and influence of its platform to promote that false story. And to this day, we still have this persistent belief in a good chunk of the US population that somehow Trump won and was robbed, when that is actually untrue. Because of situations like this, people want to dismiss all forms of news and say, well, Fox lied, CNN must lie, MSNBC must lie. We need to get rid of everything. And I think this was a really extreme and egregious case. And I think for the most part, the information that's going out over cable channels is purely opinion, but people are mistaking it for news. The textbook talks about this question: can we control the media? Um, Many years ago, Time magazine had a cover story where they said the most important person in the information age was you. This was a kind of a cheesy cover. It was a glitzy cover. It looked a little bit like a mirror when you picked up the magazine cover. It was supposed to be a reflection of you, the reader. Um, I don't really believe that Web 2.0 is as magical and majestic as its advocates would say. I do think there are unequal power dynamics when it comes to mass media, and large corporations and individuals with deep pockets definitely have more influence and potential power than the average citizen. However, that doesn't mean the average citizen is powerless. I'm not saying the average citizen is powerless. I'm just saying that it's not a totally equal playing field, and social media, as great as it is, has not dethroned mass media completely, that we still have outlets of mass media. So individuals may be able to get their voice out, may be able to get their viewpoint spread further than they were before, but we still have these mass media outlets to deal with. My metaphor for describing mass media, going back to that Spider-Man meme, would be that media is a funhouse mirror. Okay, a funhouse mirror. For those of you who were never blessed or privileged enough to go to a carnival, it's kind of this warped curve mirror. It exaggerates certain body parts and diminishes other body parts as well. So you stand in front of it, you look like you got a big head or a big torso or long legs or something. So the funhouse mirror is a reflection of reality. Media is a reflection of reality. However, it is not a pure reflection. It exaggerates certain factors and diminishes other factors as well. So I think you should think of media like that, a reflection of reality, but not a pure reflection of reality. The aim of this book, and which are also the aims of the class as well, we're going to conduct a substantial investigation of various media industries. The textbook and the textbook author and myself, we want to help you understand that media messages have an effect, sometimes profound, on all of us. I think the effects of media can often be exaggerated, and they often are exaggerated, but I don't think media is completely unimportant. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a professor. But I do think that sometimes popular opinion exaggerates them a little bit. So we're going to kind of interrogate and investigate that. And then ultimately, we want to empower you to exert an equal or greater force back on the media. If you are upset about media representation, maybe you're from a particular group, a particular minority group, and you are upset with the representation, then fix it. And I'm not saying that flippantly. I'm saying that in all earnestness. You have the tools, your capability to create media messages of your own. So if you're not happy with the media messages that are out there and you think you could do a better job, then by all means do it. You should do it. You have the means to do it. And maybe this class can give you the nudge or help you get in that direction. Okay, I've talked long enough. I was hoping you could see Hepner Hall. Hepner Hall's over there. You can't see it. The backlighting is blown out. But anyway, you can kind of get the gist. I am on campus. It's summer. And I'm going to do some more lectures from right here, this spot.